If the technology is working, I'd like to say good evening, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the gallery behind, and anyone who's watching this evening on YouTube. And welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee of Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council. I propose to take at least the beginning of the agenda as stated, although I'm going to exercise my right as chairman to move an agenda item up to, and I think it's more logical to take it in that way. But let's start with agenda item 1, which is apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Jones. I've also got apologies from Councillor Maxfield, for whom Councillor Panther is substituting this evening. Do we know of any further apologies this evening? In that case, we'll move to item 2 on our agenda this evening, which is declarations of interest. Does any member wish to make such a declaration?
Chair, in relation to item 4, I just want to make note that I do live in the Madeley area, though not in the immediate area. I don't know whether that's at all relevant.
No, I don't think so, Councillor. You have no direct financial interest in this development, I take it. If there are no further declarations or comments, we'll proceed to our next item, item 3, which is minutes of our previous proceedings, printed for you on the agenda this evening from pages 5 to 8. Are members content that they are a correct record of our previous proceedings? And again, I take silence there as assent, which means we'll move to our first substantive item this evening, which is item 4, application for major development land south of Honeywall Lane, Madeley Heath. What we need to do now is we have 2 speakers who wish to address us. I'll take them in the order that we should do, which is Councillor Gary White as a ward member, and then Mrs. Justine Ensari, who is a supporter of the development. The rules, again, I will just outline for anyone who's listening in on YouTube, and anyone who's unfamiliar with them. Each of our speakers will have 5 minutes to address the committee. They'll be timed by the clerk, who's sitting to my right. After 4 of those 5 minutes have elapsed, an oral warning will be given to make sure that the speaker doesn't miss out any points they think are absolutely crucial. Those 5 minutes are the sum total of our speaker's contribution to the debate. After that, it's for the committee itself to debate the matter. So on those terms, I invite Councillor White to address the committee. Councillor. Perhaps before I do, I should just ask our officers if there's any further information that's emerged which isn't on our report, which is pertinent to this item this evening.
No, there's nothing. Thank you, Chair.
In that case, Councillor, when you're ready, please make your address.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to make members aware, if they're not already aware, that there are 2 items for this development on the agenda. We're discussing item 4 at the moment. There will subsequently be a discussion on item 13, both of which are the same application. My understanding, and I'm sure the officers will correct me if I'm wrong, is that this particular item is for reserve matters only. And therefore it is basically already, this site has outline planning permission. This is a full planning permission, but with regards to the Section 106 monies, that is dealt with separately. So first of all, with relation to this, I spoke, you will recall, I think 2 planning meetings ago, and I stated that myself and the parish council and the other ward members did not have any issue with the actual application proposal itself. We had an issue with the 106 treatment. So for item 4, we are very much in favour of this. We think it's a well thought out proposal. We believe that it is looking forward in the design and the concept at which such a number of houses can be built in a semi-rural area such as ours. And it encourages good community engagement and ways of living together in what we do believe would be a benchmark standard for the area and will certainly enhance our community. So I will be speaking on the following item regards to 106 separately, but as regards of this, I just wanted to make everybody aware that we are very much in favour of the development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I'll now ask Mrs. Ensari, supporter of the scheme, to address the committee on the same terms. You'll have to come to the front, I'm afraid, to use one of the microphones. Otherwise, people on the YouTube system won't be able to hear you. Okay, no, it's absolutely fine. I've got you the other way round, but that's all right. Could I point out now, Mr. Andrews, I'm afraid you won't be able to use visual material. They're excluded from the terms of public speaking, but we look forward to your speech to us now. So I think any of these microphones will work for you. Again, you have 5 minutes with a warning after 4. What you need to do is press the little button in the middle of the console, and that will light up the thing for you. So whenever you're ready, please fire away. There we are.
Oh, are we on? Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you, Chair, for allowing us a further opportunity to speak this evening following the outcome of the September committee. I appreciate the detail of this is dealt with in the planning report, so I won't cover this here in my brief presentation this evening. My name is Chris Andrews from Andmore. We're bringing forward this application along with our team of friends, collaborators and partners and advisors. This reserved matters application that we're delighted to is recommended for approval is for 34 of the 35 dwellings which were previously approved as an outline planning consent, and alongside the variation to the 106, which I know is a separate agenda item this evening. That 106 has been subject to an independent viability review process. The proposal in front of you today for 34 homes is the result of 12 months of detailed pre-application discussions with the council and has evolved through many iterations of the scheme layout and design. During this period, we have visited some of the most successful recent residential schemes in the UK, including the award-winning Marmalade Lane scheme in Cambridge, which looked to put community and placemaking at its heart. It's won several national design awards and has been a hugely successful scheme in terms of placemaking. These same values sit at the heart of the scheme that we're bringing forward today, and we're really pleased that we've managed to really bring out some of those within our scheme. We're confident that the proposed development is of exceptionally high quality, balancing the needs of the council, local community, future residents and the environment. We've invested a lot of work into the layout and design, and it really is different from a standard housing layout. We're seeking to deliver a scheme which uses high quality materials and adopts character areas, which we call the lane, the commons, which includes an open green space for an orchard, along with the yards and the green terrace, which is a strip of land to the south. This provides further green space for residential amenity. These distinct character areas provide varied family accommodation and a consistent architectural theme running throughout the development. We have consulted on technical matters with highways and have an agreed refuse collection strategy, along with agreement of matters such as parking, boundary treatments, bike storage, etc. These are resolved and incorporated into the design that is being considered tonight. The proposals are sustainable and include a significant south-facing landscape terrace, which is a unique feature in a residential scheme such as this. This residence asset, along with the overall design of the layout, looks to bring the residents together with an opportunity for social spaces, grow your own allotment and other activities. And we hope that these will help to support the community aspirations that we have and hopefully the new residents of the scheme would have. We think it's a wonderful opportunity for residents to flourish and create a place we can all be proud of. It should be noted that the residents' green open spaces are to be owned and managed by the residents through a management company that's owned by the residents. We've undertaken an extensive pre-application process and held meetings with the council, and also undertook a design review panel with Urban Vision in April 2020, which we found to be a useful exercise. The panel was supportive of our overall design, ethos and creation of our character areas, and felt that there was an opportunity to further develop the space to the south of the site to be an integral part of the scheme. These comments have been taken into consideration and have enhanced the scheme considerably and resulted in the development of our green terrace. As part of the planning process, we've undertaken community consultation, albeit unfortunately not quite as interactive as we would like due to COVID-19. We prepared a presentational flyer and issued this to neighbouring properties, informing them of the proposals and seeking their views prior to submission of an application. The Parish Council have also been consulted during the pre-application stage. Our planning application put before you this evening, which is recommended for approval, is of high quality in nature and accords with the development plan. And we look forward to continue to work with the council and local key stakeholders to deliver these exciting homes for the local community. Finally, I would like to thank the officers for working closely with us and members for the opportunity to speak this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrews. Before I open the item for debate, I'll just ask our officers if they wish to comment on anything they've heard so far.
No comments other than just to confirm what Councillor White said, that this is an application for reserved matters approval. So the details of the scheme following the granting of outline planning permission, which permitted the principle of residential development of this site.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. I'd just like to re-echo that fact that there are two items on the same site this evening. So we need to make sure that we address the issue at hand, and that is the reserved matters at the moment. So I invite comment from members. Councillor Panther.
Yeah, just a quick one, Chair, and I hope it comes under this. On page 15, under views of consultees, it mentions about the unadopted status of the road layout. Is it going to remain unadopted or will it be adopted?
The intention is that it would remain unadopted, but there is a condition recommended which seeks to secure a management strategy for the landscaped areas and the highways, management and maintenance, and this is a matter that the waste service raised concerns with, but they're satisfied that they can access these properties directly in front of the property by driving over the unadopted surfaces, which is not their standard practice, because they would not be liable for any damage caused to the surface of the road. So yeah, there's no concerns from a waste strategy perspective.
In that case, Chair, does that place any liability on the social housing? Should any financial liability be made on the owners of the properties coming off this unadopted road?
Well, that's a matter between the property owners and the developers. But yes, it's normally the case that where there is a management scheme secured through a development, that there is some form of payment, annual payment made by the occupiers. It's a standard practice. And whilst we have no information to confirm one way or the other, I anticipate that will be what happens here.
Any further comments from members? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have seen this before, and now it's come back to us. I think the conversation last time focused on the elements of the previous application that related to the S106. Now that those have been separated out and appear at a later stage this evening, I'm happy to move the recommendations as printed on this item.
And I have a seconder in Councillor Panther. If there are no further comments, I'll proceed to a vote. Could I see those in favour of the recommendation as printed? That, I think, is unanimous. As has already been pointed out, that there are two items on this particular development this evening, and I think it makes sense now for us to move agenda item 13 up the agenda so that we take these together. And as you'll see, this one is in fact focused on the S106 agreement. Once again, Councillor White, as ward member, wishes to address us, and the protocol says that he speaks first. Will be followed this time, I think, by Mrs. Entisari as the supporter of the development and the recommendation here. Once again, I'll just outline very briefly the protocol, which is that each of our speakers has 5 minutes to speak to us. They're timed by the clerk who sits to my right. An oral warning will be given when 4 of those 5 minutes has lapsed, and those 5 minutes are the sum total of the contribution to the debate this evening. So on those terms, I again invite Councillor White as a ward councillor to address the committee. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that I spoke against this 2 planning meetings ago, largely because the Section 106 money had been substantially eroded, with only a sum left for secondary school places, and certainly none for public open space and community use. And I was very pleased and grateful to members for listening and for rejecting the application. Since then, the applicant has engaged very constructively with ward members, and that was to understand really why we had such concerns, what benefit the community would reach from a contribution through the Section 106. And they've also listened to what we fed back through the parish council concerns. And I'm very pleased to say that that has led to what is now in front of you. So effectively, the secondary school monies remain intact, and a further contribution of £80,000 has now been agreed for community use and public open space, of which the parish council have had the ability to further engage and have put through a number of projects within close proximity of the development, all of which seem very appropriate and have therefore effectively been accepted through this proposal. So I'd like to thank members again, because what we have now in front of us is something that is far more acceptable from a community perspective and from a ward member's perspective. And that has only come about because of your stance in the September meeting. And I would just now like to reiterate that we are now satisfied with this and are therefore in favour of the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor White. Now ask Mrs. Entisari to come up to the front. Hopefully the technology will work a little bit better for you than it did for your colleague, and address the meeting on the same terms. So if you depress the button in the centre of the console, it should light up for you.
Oh yeah, okay, and then it stays lit, right, okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Justine Entisari, an Associate Planner from Iceni Projects, and I've been working closely with Chris Andrews at Anmore Limited and the wider design team as the appointed planning consultant for this project. Firstly, I would like to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening, and to the planning officers in particular for working closely with us throughout the process. As you've already heard today, my clients are looking to bring forward an exceptionally high quality residential development at Honeywell Lane, providing a mix of bespoke house types alongside significant areas of landscaping for future residents and the local community to enjoy. Alongside the Reserve Matters application, you've also been asked to consider the proposals to amend the Section 106 agreement. By way of background, when the initial outline planning application was granted consent, the proposed Section 106 was not subject to viability testing based on a deliverable project. So then when my clients came on board to prepare the Reserve Matters application, it was immediately clear that the level of Section 106 agreed at the outline stage was unsustainable. My clients appointed development viability experts Grasscroft to assess the scheme and prepare a viability report. This report showed that there were over £980,000 of abnormals associated with bringing the site forward for residential development, alongside a further £250,000 of costs associated with delivering open space and highways improvement works. Overall, the report concluded that the site could not support any level of Section 106. The Grasscroft report was the subject of a detailed and transparent independent viability review undertaken on behalf of the council by their appointed party, Butters John B. Butters John B concluded in their report that the scheme could support £27,000 as a baseline, although with some cost savings under a best case scenario, there was the potential to increase the sum available for contributions to somewhere between £75,000 and £100,000. My clients acknowledged the findings of the report and entered into further discussions with the council, who indicated at the time that secondary school places were a priority. This then led to the decision to offer the £83,000 for Madeley High School. The proposed level of contribution was the subject of discussion at the September Planning Committee, where members expressed a clear view that the level of Section 106 was not sufficient. Having reflected on the outcome of the September Committee, my clients have liaised with the ward members to better understand the needs of the local community and have made a commercial decision to offer a financial contribution on a without prejudice basis of £80,000 towards public open space, alongside the £83,110 for secondary school provision. It should be noted that this is an entirely commercial decision and does not reflect any improved position with regard to site viability. Given that development costs are rising rapidly at a rate that outstrips any increase in sales values, it was determined that to re-engage both Grasscroft and Butters John B would not result in a more viable project and would lead to further costs and time delays, which adds additional financial pressure to the project. The offer of the additional £80,000 reflects my client's commitment to the site and the development proposals, which will be brought forward quickly should both the Reserve Matters application and the Section 106 amendments be approved. Having considered this in detail, it's clear that there is no further money available for the Section 106. And if the proposed Section 106 amendments are refused today, the Reserve Matters application simply cannot be delivered. In light of this, we hope that you will consider the uplift in our offer positively and support the proposals in front of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I would draw members' attention to the fact there is a brief supplementary report to this item and a slightly revised recommendation on that supplementary report. So please do be aware that that's what we're looking at the moment. Before I open this for debate, again, I'll just ask our officers if they have anything to comment on what they've heard so far.
Thank you, Chairman. No additional points. The figures are as set out in page 7 of the supplementary report, and the recommendation as amended is in that document. Thank you, Chair. So having heard that, I now invite comment from members. Councillor Panther.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the previous two speakers, especially Councillor White, who argued well on behalf of the local authority in Madeley, I see no problem with this whatsoever, and I would move that it be accepted.
Any further comment from members? Councillor Moffat. Think again, Councillor, what you'll have to do is press your finger down on it for a period of time, then hopefully it will light up for you.
Thank you. Press it again, Councillor. On off. Okay, yeah, thank you. I was impressed with the efforts to consult with the community and also with the parish council. And I would be prepared to second the proposal as put forward by Councillor Panton to accept this newer arrangement on the Section 106.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I endorse what the two previous speakers have said, including the speakers for the application. And I'm pleased to see that things have been resolved to this extent. But I think at this point, whilst I'm really pleased that this has been resolved with this particular application, I think we need to be mindful that we need to set down those markers where major development takes place, particularly in the rural areas where the infrastructure hasn't changed for decades and decades, that developers need to, at the very start of an application, the very start of the process, need to look at this and take a leaf out of the applicant's book in terms of consulting properly with the local community to see what they can do in terms of what they can offer the community if they're expected to take the building of considerable housing development. And I think that as an authority, we need to make sure that we're behind that 100%, that we need to see developers come in to this council with viable applications which consider all aspects of what they're going to put and contribute to the community as part of that application and not leave it to the last stage. So I'm really pleased that things have been resolved, and I would be happy to support this application in its amended state. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Though I will support this application, I think it's very sad news that there's still no affordable housing, and that's what people, developers seem to be thinking now. It's okay, we can come in with a pot of money, put up a few fields and whatever for agriculture and whatever you want to, but no affordable housing. I think that's a very sad indictment.
Any further comment from members? Now, we've had this item proposed and seconded for acceptance on the, again, remember exactly what we're voting on at this point. And it's the reserve, it's the S106, and of course it's the amended recommendation on the supplementary. Could I see, please, those in favour of this item? Again, I think that is unanimous. That means we can now revert to the order of the agenda as printed, and we're going to go to item 5 on that agenda, application for minor development alleyway between units 81 and 83 High Street here in Newcastle. Again, I'll just ask our officer if there's any extra material we need to know before we proceed to a debate.
No, there's nothing further. Thank you.
In that case, I open the item for comment from members. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I removed the application. It's a really sad day. In saying that, it's a sad day, really, when the alleyways there, shortcuts from the high street to the bus station and vice versa, and where people can't walk with reasonable safety to the different locations. And we can go into detail, you know, we can go into debate on policing and the lack of policing in the town centre, but that's there for probably another day or more political debate. But yes, I'd like to move this planning application. Thank you.
Any further comment from members?
I'm quite happy to second.
I think you're going to have to go through the same drill, Councillor Reddish. So if anybody didn't hear that in the ether, this motion has been both proposed and now seconded by Councillor Reddish. I don't see any further contributions waiting to be made, so I'm going to put this to a vote. Could I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? And again, I think that passes unanimously. That brings us to item 6 on our agenda, application for other development, land adjacent to London Road, Newcastle. And again, I draw members' attention to the fact there is a small supplementary on this, but the recommendation remains the same as set out on your main papers. Again, I'll just ask our officer if there's any further information we require this evening, and then I'll open it for debate.
No, nothing further. Thank you.
In that case, I invite comment from members. Councillor Northcote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to propose that this is granted and we move with this, but I would like to see going forward in terms of conditions with these that we put in place, that any base stations, any sort of modifications in terms of these in the future are kept with the original planning application remit, in terms of if there is ones that are expected to be of a certain colour or a certain shape, they're not replaced with a starkly bland white cabinet at a future date when they're updated. Thank you, Chair.
That's a very good point, Councillor. I just ask our officer, would it be the case that were the equipment associated with this to be changed, it would have to conform to the permission that we give this evening?
Well, they certainly have to carry out this development in accordance with the approved plans, assuming that's the decision of planning committee. There are significant permitted development rights associated with the telecommunications, and that covers replacements. I couldn't say with absolute certainty that where it's replaced, it would have to be the same in terms of its colour and size, etc. But we can check that. But what I can confirm is that there is no ability to impose conditions on decisions of this nature. We can't require that any replacements or replacement equipment is of a specific nature. It's a prior notification application. It's not a planning application. So the imposition of conditions is beyond the remit of the decision maker in this case.
Councillor Northcote.
Thank you. Yes, I get that in terms of the actual the suitability of the cabinet, but it just taking a drive down the A53 from Newcastle, seeing the collection of cabinets at the base of one monopole there, it seems that this can quite easily get out of hand, and it creates a real distraction to motorists, and isn't in keeping with the area at all. I think that, if we're a little bit more proactive, we could actually make some inroads in proposing good practice in terms of telecommunications and their installations, that we expect something of a similar colour at least to match the surrounding one that it's replacing. Thank you.
Again, our office has a brief comment to make.
What I can say is that where there is a requirement to go through an application process of this nature, where prior approval is required, as officers we will take on board comments that are made, and we will seek to ensure that the plans that are presented before you show equipment of similar nature in terms of colour, etc., to what it's replacing. But obviously that can only happen where we have control over them, where there is some form of approval process in place.
Any further comment from members? Councillor Panter.
Yeah, Chair, I've listened to what Councillor Northcote said with his experience. I really can't see any undue problem with this. I'm familiar with the area, and I'll second the recommendation.
If there are no further comments, members will see from their agenda that, in fact, we have to take two votes on this. We first have to vote that prior approval is required for this development, and then we vote on whether we feel that we wish to grant such prior approval. So could I first take a vote, because I think we formally have to take two votes on this. Take a vote on recommendation A, that prior approval is required for this development. And I think that is unanimous. And now we can proceed to a vote, if we are so minded, that such prior approval is granted. That is as per recommendation. Could I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? And that, again, I think is unanimous. It certainly passes. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda. Application for other development at Posh Wash site, Liverpool Road, Crossheath. On this item, I have an objector listed to address us this evening, Mrs. Pedley. And again, the rules, I shall just run through them, are that Mrs. Pedley can address us for 5 minutes. They're timed by the clerk to my right. And then after 4 minutes, an oral warning will be given. And those 5 minutes are the sum total of the speaker's contribution to our debate. So on those terms, I would like to invite Mrs. Pedley to come and address us. And if you use that particular one, Mrs. Pedley, you may have to depress the button. It's working already. Excellent. So that.
Good evening. I want to start with my history. In April 2018, I moved into my property, 165 Liverpool Road. Posh Wash at that time was a wide open space, just an empty forecourt. There was nothing else on except a small garden shed and a portaloo. And it was an open landscape from my garden. Autumn 2018, Posh Wash erected a timber shelter with a corrugated roof right next to my boundary and added a container with no planning permission. Christmas 2020, they erected another canopy and added another container with no planning consent. The sheer scale and size of the development has become uncontrolled and extreme over a 3-year period. The height is questionable. The application states the overall height is 4 metres, but in reality it's 5 metres. The dimensions to my boundary are questionable. It's 4 metres and not 5.7 metres. The poor quality materials and design are questionable. It's not with keeping with any of the surrounding businesses or with the area. I don't know why they didn't stick to their original design of the timber frame shelter. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It's so prominent and out of place. It's not visually attractive and it doesn't enhance the landscape. Apparently good designs are to improve better places to live and work. I understand Crossheath has always been classed as a poor area, but I think we should be promoting some care, quality and pride for the community and the character of the area. I also read the NUL Council's background papers dated the 27th of October, which I believe is rather misleading. So it states, while some sections of metal posts can be seen from my garden, it is not seen as the dominating feature from the area of the garden due to limiting height. There was no mention of the canopy, which is clearly visible. And I wonder how the conclusion can be reached without evidence because the site visit did not take place till the November the 6th. It also stated that the canopy was 5.7 metres away from my boundary, which I strongly disagree with both of these conclusions. I can clearly see an overbearing blue canopy, which resembles a circus dome tent from my garden, and clearly see it's 4 metres from my boundary. Not only is it a dominating feature, it's invading on the landscape, and it hasn't created a better place for me to live. 3 years ago, I had an open landscape, nothing was visible. I have 4 windows at the back of the home, and that all as I can see is this blue circus dome. It used to be private and secluded. Nothing was visible. The enjoyment of our garden has been damaged, and so has our quality of life. So much so that this year I've been considering selling up. It does impact on our livelihood, and it is possible that the canopies and containers could all become buildings in the future. And the other thing I want to mention, I do understand that the committee have been instructed to discuss the planning only, and I respect this, but the process does not seem to follow the planning practice guidance in regard to the decision making. The decision should be made to include accumulative issues and effects pollution, health, living conditions, acoustic environment. Everything should come together and not be separated.
1 minute.
Oh, sorry. Everything should come together and not separated on issues, nor does it have the correct ownership certificate, which doesn't seem to be playing any importance at this moment, even though it's a legal requirement for validation. And one thing I've not got to the bottom of in the application, they talk about this big tent canopy. It says it's a capacity for extensive flexibility, and I don't know what that means. I think there's a few things in the application, hours of opening, main wash areas, which aren't accurate, or to my experience, they're not accurate. And the major thing that concerns me in the last 3 years, when there's no plans, there's no building regulations put in place. And what I understand is, how can we safeguard the general public and the employees, for example, if the electrics have not been signed off? And how do we know that this building is 5 meters in the ground? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pedley.
Thank you.
So before I open the item for debate, first of all, I'm going to ask our officer to comment on what they've heard so far. Then I'm going to remind members, of course, that according to the regulations of the council, only those who went on the site visit last Saturday are in fact entitled to vote. I have a list of those people. I'm not going to read it out. You know who you are. And I hope that you would not attempt to vote were you not qualified to do so. But prior to having the debate, as I say, I'll just ask our officer to comment on what's been said so far.
Yes. This is an application for the retention of a shipping container, restoration, timber fence and the canopy that members who visited the site observed. The use of the site as a car wash has been approved. It was permitted in 2009, I believe, and that plan permission is subject to a number of conditions and controls. So there are various matters that are subject to the original planning permission that as a council we could look into and ensure that the use of the site is being operated in accordance with the planning permission. But in terms of the decision tonight, the focus needs to be on the structures that have been installed and the issues that arise from the introduction of those structures, which are set out in the key issues section of the report, relates to design of the proposal, any impact on residential amenity, any impact on highway safety, that is whether it restricts the movement of vehicles in and around the site. So those are the key issues. And we certainly are not in a position to consider matters beyond the scope of planning, the matters that may be covered by building regulations. That's not matters that are material to the determination of the application. And I think at this stage, the only other point I would like to make is in response to the concerns raised about the ownership of the site, the certificate that was completed as part of the application process. So the agent, the applicant employed an agent to submit the application on their behalf, has completed certificate A, which confirms that as far as he's concerned, the applicant is the owner of the site, and we have no information to question that. And land ownership is not a matter that's material to the decision. It is a requirement that a certificate of ownership is completed as part of the registration of the application process, but it's not something that can be taken into account in the determination of this application. And yet the measurements within the report are those that are taken from the plans that were submitted. That's as much as I can say at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now open the item for debate. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for yourself and the officer's time on Saturday morning with the site visits. Very informative from the point of 165 Liverpool Road. Planning permission was given for this site, and has been said by the young lady that it was just an open new car park, and the business then has been a success, and so is the garage next to it. And we've gone on, and the site has been expanded. Now, I'm coming from the point of view, if we started with a clear sheet of paper, and the applicant would come in for the canopy, for containers, or some storage space, or canteen, whatever, what would the restrictions, what we would put on, or not restrictions, worked with the applicant to make that site a lot better than it is today. And I wasn't very impressed with the site itself. I don't know, health and safety and whatever stuff lying about. But then again, that was another side to it. But I felt if we would have looked at it, what we'd have said with a structure, a sealed structure that keeps the spray in on that site, and that would have then include health and safety with the height and all the rest of it. And I noticed environmental health haven't give any remarks to this. But again, when people are working in that type of darker conditions, they need the height there for the spray if it is a sealed unit. So my main concerns are the colour of the canopy and the height there. That will, I think, will be on the point of view where people are working. That comes into that, but also from 165, finishing off that, with soffits and whatever, to make it a sealed container, but a lot more pleasing to the eye from 165. I think that the structure's there. It's a mobile structure, but again, it's the colour of the canopy and the railings and the containers. Really, it's a mishmash of. And I think to bring it back in, I think the colour of can we condition it? Asking you, through you, Chair, to the officers, the colour, change the colour to a grey, what the famous term is, the battleship grey, that links in with the skyline, whether it's sunny or overcast. But the main point being from 165 to really clear that debris, as I call it, across the top where the lintels come across, and these open gaps there where spray comes through, but also extend the fencing that no spray gets around that corner, either to the east and to the west. So if we can put conditions on that, Mr. Chairman, if they are permitted in that sense, I can see that the business can carry on, but they need that those conditions put in on the containers. Again, I'll leave that to other members of the committee. I haven't got a great what's him on those particular points, but the colour of the canopy and the north side of the canopy wants actually a lot of work going on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just ask our officer about that. I think there are two issues there. I'm not sure that a change of the canopies is what we're debating this evening. I stand to be corrected by our officers on that, but the question of whether we could give permission but require a change of colour, effectively, that would, of course, be a change of canopy, or at least the material part of the canopy. And again, I don't know where we stand on that, and I think it would be useful for us, for our officers, to just clarify those points.
Well, the application is for the retention of what's already there. So the canopy is blue in colour, and that is what they're asking the council as the decision maker and the planning committee as decision maker to approve. I think potentially you could impose a condition that requires a replacement of the canopy cover. the roof to the canopy with a different colour, but arguably that goes beyond the scope of the application, which is for the retention of what's already there. So I wouldn't confidently recommend that you could impose such a condition. But if that's the decision that members wish to make, then we could issue the decision on that basis. The applicant has a right of appeal against any conditions imposed, and potentially could challenge it on the basis that it is beyond the scope of the decision maker to require that. So I would highly recommend that you consider whether the blue canopy is acceptable or not, and if you consider that it is not resulting in harm to the extent that a refusal is justified, then a decision should be to approve the canopy as proposed. Reference has been made to alterations to what's on site to address issues of spray escaping from the site and affecting adjoining residential properties. We can, as a decision maker, only impose conditions that meet identified tests. And one of those tests is that it has to be relevant to the development to be permitted. And what you've got to consider is whether an application for a shipping container, a fence and a canopy introduces the issue of spray escaping from the site and affecting the residential amenities of adjoining properties. And I would argue that it doesn't. It doesn't introduce that, and it doesn't exacerbate any existing problems. And I would advise you that, in my opinion, it's not relevant to the development that you're being asked to consider. What we would need to do as a planning authority is review the original planning permission and the conditions imposed and the restrictions in place, and could seek to ensure that if there is a breach of an identified breach of the original permission, that we pursue compliance with that. One of the conditions of that permission was that the power washing should only take place in the washing area protected by perspex screens, as shown on a specified plan. The washing area is central on the approved plans of the original permission for the use, and the details of the perspex screens are on that plan. So we can, separately to the determination of this application, investigate whether what is specified by the permission for the use is in place. But in terms of what's before you tonight, your considerations are down to whether the design of the proposal and its appearance is acceptable, whether in terms of its scale and position, the elements of the proposal are acceptable in terms of the impact on residential amenity, and whether the elements of the proposal raise any highway safety concerns. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Got to come back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Listening to the officers, then I'll begin absolute refusal on this planning application because it's hinting watching with the built environment, the colour, and also the containers as have been hoisted into that into those positions, and the residents' amenities. Highways, we've got no watching on that. They have done some work on the highway side of it, but that's my main concerns. Refusal on the colour of the fencing, and mainly the canopy, and also that residents' amenities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a second? I think you may. Councillor Mrs. Williams.
I will second that, but I did want to speak as well, please, John.
Well, please speak now.
John beat me to it, actually. I was going to go for refusal. I think this whole application should be thrown out and come in with a new scheme altogether. It is a mess. We've got a shipping container there, which is dark, dank, no windows, and yet we expect employees to sit in there and eat. And probably go to the toilet as well. In this day and age, as a council, and a planning committee, can we possibly expect that? Surely in this day and age, we should be refusing it. I'm sure that when this first came in for an application and we gave permission, all it cleaned was cars. Now it's doing commercial, huge vans and whatever. So there is spray going over that fence. You could even feel the spray when we went on the site visit. So I'm sorry, but this is a total wrong application and it should be thrown out.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask you to knock your light off? Because I know Councillor Holland wants to make, and you'll cancel each other out. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I've got a great deal of sympathy for the representative, the public speaker tonight, who's an objector to the scheme. Having attended the site visit, I think those of us who had the walk around have got a much better understanding of the application that's in front of us and the context of it than we would otherwise have had. She is perhaps regrettably much more directly affected by the operation of this business than others. I have to say, having been around the site, I don't think that other residences or the amenity of other people who live locally is nearly affected by even a fraction as much as the resident of the property where we stood in the back garden. Having said which, the impact of this business on that residence and on the amenity of the residents who live at that property is quite severe. It's unfortunate to hear Councillor Mrs. Williams talk about how we need to throw the application out. I have a feeling that the time for comments like that and the time for the impassioned speech that she gave was when consent was given for this operation in the first place. We all know what a car wash is like. We all know what a car wash does. And perhaps if we'd, as an authority, applied a bit more care when circumscribing the operation of this facility when it was first approved, we might be in a better position today. The application that's in front of us is not for things that will make a difference, I don't think. It's not for the principle of having this car wash business on the site. It is strictly related to the objects that were pointed out to us on the site. So I am minded, having looked at those objects and having walked around and having considered everything, I'm minded to move approval. I'm minded to move the recommendation as it is printed for us tonight. But that's not to say that I necessarily approve of the business or indeed the way in which it's operating. I certainly hope and expect that separately from this planning process, there will be an enforcement activity undertaken in line with some of the concerns that have been raised with us tonight, but I'm sure otherwise. I remember going around the site and I remember seeing 2 shipping containers, and the officer who took us around said, you need to remember, members, that only one of these shipping containers is included in this planning application. Well, what about the other one? If it's a permanent structure on site, it ought to have planning consent. It is very, very regrettable, and I don't know whether or not the applicant or representatives of the applicant are watching in the ether tonight, but it is extremely regrettable that this application is being made retrospectively. We can't hold that against applicants. That's not within our authority to do. We just have to approve or disapprove of what comes in front of us. But had they approached us prospectively, we would have been in a position to do what Councillor Williams suggested, which is to ask for some materials and for some details to be altered in a way that might have made it a more acceptable application. That said, in my view, it's on the acceptable side of things, and I will move the recommendations as printed. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Panther.
Thank you, Chair. The application mentions restoration of a timber fence. And I think all of us that were there see that some efforts have been made to repair the fence there. Just how much of it was not really made clear. As regards to shipping container, it's someone in the corner. I appreciate reading the papers that the height is marginally over the height of the adjoining fence. But have we got a right to refuse it on the basis of what it's been used for, or is it just the fact that it's there?
I'll ask our office to comment on that question.
I would say that your consideration is about the fact that it's there, the impact that container has in terms of its appearance, amenity, and that is whether it results in loss of light, overbearing impact, those kinds of issues, and highway safety, because it is in use for purposes ancillary to and associated with the lawful use of the site as a car wash.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Panton.
The issue over the canopy, well, it's the same colour as the shipping containers. So does that mean we can object on the basis of the colour of the shipping containers as well? I can't see there's any point in that at all. The colour of it will not affect its use. I've listened to what Councillor Holland has said and his concerns for the objector. To some extent, I certainly share those. But having looked at it on the site visit, I cannot find enough reasons to object, and therefore I would be prepared to second Councillor Holland's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments before? We've now got two motions. I'll take refusal first, but prior to that, sorry, Mrs. Moulton.
Apologies. I think we need clarification, because there's two elements to the refusal. The visual impact, that it's not in keeping, but there was also reference to residential amenity, but it's not clear what concerns there are in terms of residential amenity, and we need to ensure that they're relevant to the application in front of you. So if some clarification on what you mean by harm to residential amenity is required. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, we went to see from 165 Liverpool Road, and I've read state that the state of the canopy from that side was not in keeping, and the site of it alone, it wasn't built properly. It was just it was better looking from the other side, from the A34. But when the residents are looking at the back end of that canopy, that was absolutely out of keeping. From that's my point of view from that side of it. But we mentioned fencing. The fencing on that side, on the northern side, was never part of it. It was on the western side, back of the containers, where the developer actually has put supposedly new fencing in. I haven't been around to check, Mr. Chairman, but that on that side where the containers were, and they'll point in one of the first report where it was just you just see a foot of the top of the containers. But that's my my objection is the residential amenities. It's destroying that particular, as has been said, in that little garden. So sit in the garden without spray coming over it, without a reasonable outlook, and that's not in the case at this moment in time.
So again, I'm sorry to sound tiresome about this, Councillor, but I mean we do need to formulate these things as you know. It sounds to me like what you're saying is it's the visual nature of this is detracting from residential amenity. That it is the site of the thing, both as you would say, not particularly well constructed, and also the colour of the thing, which is what concerns you. Am I correct in saying that?
The construction, Mr. Chairman, but the colours secondary. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I've seen this business, over the years, and as far as my memory serves, as you mentioned earlier, there were perspex screens before without any canopy, so there wouldn't have been a visual canopy, to be viewed from the position of 165. Now, when the resident is within the patio area, there is that rather imposing canopy structure there, which is, large steel framework, and then obviously the blue canopy itself. And there's already an expanse of the back of the car wash visible from the garden in terms of the valeting area and the screens there. I don't know if they were there before, but I do think obviously the canopy as it is a new thing. And to me, it did appear quite imposing from the patio area, which is the main area which you would have a table and chairs and sit. So to me, I think, does that sum up enough evidence to suggest that it does affect residential amenity?
I think that's a judgment for yourself, councillor.
Well, I feel it does, and I'm just wondering if it formulates enough from a planning,
I think what I'm looking for is whether the residential amenity, and what Councillor Williams is saying is effectively loss or to do with the visual impact of the thing rather than anything else. I think that's what our officers need to formulate a rejection on. And I'm correct in saying that would be material consideration and that would be a perfectly relevant thing to vote upon. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that's correct.
So now we've got that clear in our minds. Are there any further contributions? Again, members who can't vote are perfectly entitled to join the debate, but they are not allowed to vote. So those are the rules of the council. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Chair. I drive past this posh wash very often on the way to work. It's an eyesore. It's a very ugly, ill-designed structure. I'm minded that both Councillor Holland and Councillor Williams are in agreement in saying that if this business had applied for the correct planning permission in the first place, then the borough would have had more control over what was constructed, and it would have been much better than what is sitting there now. I'm also listening to councillors saying that there isn't only one shipping containment but two on the site. I'm very concerned that if permission is given and granted for this retrospective planning permission, what's to stop other businesses just going ahead, doing whatever is the cheapest, most convenient, with complete disregard to the aesthetic that we would like to see the borough embrace. And I just think it sends out the wrong message, first of all. So for me, the scale of it, the lack of care and consideration, the lack of care and consideration for local residents who are affected by it, it looks like a complete mess. And I think I know that I can't vote this evening because I didn't go out on the site visit, but I think it's a dangerous precedent to set to give retrospective permission for these kinds of cavalier constructions, if you like. And I'm in support of the business. We want businesses to thrive in our area, but not at the detriment to the borough, to the aesthetic of the borough, and certainly not to the detriment of residents. So although I can't vote, I can't sit here in favour of what's happened. I'd like them to go back to kind of seeking proper permission and proceeding properly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Have we any other contributions from members before I proceed to a vote? In that case, I will proceed to a vote, and I will take Councillor Williams's motion first, that this application be refused. And my understanding is it's because of its visual impact will detract from residential amenity. Could I see, is that all right, Councillor? I'm just going to make sure that you're happy with that formulation. Could I see, please, those in favour of refusal on those grounds? And I see three. I'll look to our clerk to confirm that. Can I see those against refusal? And I see four. Again, I look to our clerk. So that motion falls. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Before we proceed to a vote on the alternative that's been put forward, could I extract a comment, at least from officers, in relation to what I said about enforcement activity on the site? Now, we've heard tonight, I think, not only structures there which may require consent that don't have consent, but also whether or not the operation of this business is in accordance with the planning permission that's extant, including the site operating hours. And we heard from the public speaker tonight that that is a concern. So there are all sorts of things that I don't think any of us here are very happy with, but they do plainly relate to the planning consent that is extant already on the site.
Councillor, I think, yes, that's a very valuable point and one worth exploring. So what perhaps we could ask our officers is whether we can append to a resolution, and I don't know whether we can mandate rather than merely request that this business is looked at by our enforcement team. And arguably, if we can do that, and as I say, it's an if, let's see what our officer says, whether in fact we can equally mandate that a report be brought back to this committee so that we can assure ourselves of what is going on.
I'm not sure I can answer the question quite as put, but I can assure you that we will be investigating the activity on the site and seeking to establish whether there are any breaches of planning control that go beyond the matters that are covered in the planning application before you tonight. And that I hear the comments about bringing a report on the enforcement case back to planning committee, and I can confirm that would, if that's what members would wish to see, then we would bring that report to a committee once the investigation is completed and we have a clear view as to what, if any, breaches there are.
Could I then suggest, and I know you wish to speak, Councillor Williams, so when I've finished, I'll let you speak, that we then, at the very least, depending on how the committee is minded, append to a resolution, were a resolution to permit to be passed, a request that this be looked at as a matter of urgency by the enforcement team, and that we would want to see a report about that brought back to this committee. Perhaps, and again, I don't know, I think it would be within the remit of the committee to specify a time there, or whether they would wish that in the first instance that be passed to the chairman and the vice chairman as a matter of when the timing is. That I think is for the committee. But what we've heard from the officer is that we could have a report of this sort. And I think then in that respect, the timing of it is quite important. Certainly, we don't want this to be a wish list, which then is kicked into long grass and disappears. But whether you'd wish to fit a specific time, or whether you would want to leave that in the hands of myself and the vice chairman is a different matter. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarity, really, we're visiting the original planning application. Will that override this decision that we've made tonight in respect of the canopy? We're going back to, as the officer mentioned, perspex, screens, and that. Are we going back to that, or we've got permission for the canopy to stay? And what we're looking at, the original planning application, that there might be some detail in that that's not being adhered to.
My guess, and again, I'll stand to be corrected by our officers, councillor, is that if we vote for this evening, we have cleared this. I mean, we can't then revisit the canopy, so to speak. But what we can revisit are the operating times, the mode of operation, and such like, which were in the original conditions. But I looked to our officers to see if I've got that right. I may not have done.
No, I think that is correct. Yes, if the recommendation is accepted tonight, the planning permission will have been given for the shipping container. That's the subject of the application, the timber fence and the canopy. So that will be authorised development. There will be no breach of planning control relating to those elements. So it's other aspects. So we would be looking at the second shipping container to establish whether the siting of that on the site is a breach of planning control, and the operation of the car wash, and whether it complies with the original planning permission, which impose certain requirements and restrictions on how that use takes place. So it'd be those that we will be focusing on.
Now, I'll come back to Councillor Holland, who moved the resolution in the first place, whether he will be content with the sorts of things I suggested could be appended to that resolution to be appended. After all, it's his resolution.
Very happy with that, Chair.
And happy at the same time for, in the first instance, consultation about timing to take place with the chairman and the vice chairman rather than to set a time specifically.
Excellent, Chair.
In that case, I will assure members of the committee that we will be looking into this, and if things seem tardy, I will bring a resolution to this committee to give a specific time. So I can assure you it won't be kicked into long grass. But now I think it's time to move to a vote on Councillor Holland's resolution, which is to permit, with the rider, that we ask the enforcement team to look at the way that the business is being operated and to bring a report about that back to this committee. Again, I just quickly look to our officers to make sure that that's all in order. And it is. So could I see, please, those in favour with that extra amendment? And I see 4, I think, to our clerk, and those against. And I see 3, so that resolution is passed. That means we can progress on our agenda to item 8, the quarterly report on progress on enforcement cases on pages 41 and following. And I propose to take this page by page, beginning on page 42, as 41 is simply the introductory sentence to report. So number 5, Boggs Cottages. At least I think we have a date. Am I correct in saying that we have a date for proceedings?
Yes, it's scheduled to take place on the 23rd of February next year.
So I'm sure that all members would wish that this was moving with more speed than it is, but we are a little bit further down the track than perhaps we've been in the past. Any comments from members before I progress to the page 43? In that case, let's progress to page 43, the barn at Bignell End. And again, I just invite our officer to comment briefly on what's going on there.
Well, the enforcement notice appeal hearing commenced today. It hasn't been concluded yet. There is a requirement to visit this, or the site visit that is part of the process hasn't taken place, so it will conclude tomorrow, and then we will await the appeal decision, and hopefully the next quarter we will have had that decision and we'll be reporting what the outcome of the appeal was.
Any comment from members? In that case, let's progress to page 44 at Blackbrook. And there you can see there is an inquiry procedure which is scheduled to open on the 23rd of this month. Again, I look for comment from members, or are we happy simply to receive the information? In that case, let's pass to page 45, Hazley Paddocks at Madeley Heath. And again, I think we are awaiting an appeal decision on this item.
Yes, that's correct.
So again, if there are no comments from members, we could pass to page 46. And here we've got an interesting one at Harrisey Head, because I think we've now gone beyond, in fact, the due notification date, which was the 1st of this month.
Yes, so the notice took effect, and the requirement to remove the silo within the month, that the date by which that should be done is in the past now. We believe it has gone, but we haven't yet clarified that. So a site visit is due to take place on Thursday, and hopefully the notice has been complied with. If not, we will pursue compliance through the appropriate means.
Could I ask Mrs. Moulton, I mean, let's hope that compliance has happened, that when that site visit takes place, if it's gone, I think we can leave it. If it hasn't gone, could an information item be put on our next agenda, please, to make members aware that there's still an outstanding issue here?
Yes, certainly, if that's what members would like. I mean, it would be a matter that's reported in the next quarterly report, but if you want to know sooner than that, then that can be done. Yes, certainly.
I think it would be useful just to see how things are moving along. What we don't want is things to sort of be parked and drop off the radar, so to speak. The second one at Madeley, where do we stand with that one at the moment?
Well, they're still within the period within which they can lodge an appeal against the notice because it's only relatively recently been served. We've not, to my knowledge, had any indication that an appeal is going to be lodged, but that there is time. As I say, they've got until the 19th of November to do that. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to page 47. Issues at Audley and Kidsgrove. In both cases, I see the target is served the notice. Has there been any movement on that so far?
Well, certainly with respect to Donville's Farm, we have in the last couple of days received a draft notice, which we will be reviewing and ensuring that the wording is correct and issuing shortly thereafter. I think we're yet to receive a draft notice in respect to Robert Coates, but I think instructions were only sent within the last few working days, relatively recently. So I would anticipate in the next couple of weeks we will have had a draft notice and we'll be in a position to serve that notice.
That's heartening to know. I know that many members, we had quite a long debate on this site at Planning Committee. It would be nice to see that the process was taken further. Are members content with receiving that information? I think that brings us to always rather awkward, these reports, aren't they, in the way that they sort of flop around on the agenda. But I think that brings us to the end of that item. Are members happy to receive that information? That brings us to item 9, the report on open enforcement cases. With a rather disappointing, it has to be said, graph sitting in front of us. And I'll just ask our officer to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you say, the tail end of that chart on page 49 on the right-hand side does make for disappointing reading. This is a report that actually indicates the number of enforcement cases that we have on hand. These are live cases being sort of dealt with at the moment. This is the dark black line at the top of the chart, but also the incoming cases at the bottom of the chart there. What the chart doesn't have actually is a list of the cases that we have dealt with and looked at over time. It would very much match that lower chart as what comes in, what goes out. It is disappointing that the divergence has occurred between the outstanding cases, despite the fact that in this last quarter, there has been a fallback of application of cases coming in. We have, though, sort of looked back over the figures and looked at how we're dealing with enforcement matters. How has this situation arisen? And more importantly, how is this situation being dealt with in the future? The situation, in part, has sort of taken effect last year. It was a very tumultuous year for various reasons, and we saw a number of cases come in. There has been an escalation in cases over the 2019-20 year, 2021, and the first half of this current sort of financial year as well. Previously, we saw 230 cases coming into the system in a whole year in 2019-20. That jumped to 271 last year. And based on current projections, it looks like we'll see around 300 cases coming in this year. That's an amount of work that officers, the council has no ability to control. That's the public, that's other sources contacting us and advising us of enforcement work. So we have what appears to be this increasing workload coming in. We're trying to push against that, and in the first of those 3 years, we actually dealt with not only the incoming work, but some of the backlog, and we were sort of taking that down, the outstanding amount. But last year, as I say, that was the particularly challenging year, and we went from a position of actually biting into 18 of the backlog case and dealing with the previous year's cases to actually having only dealt with 180 cases because of COVID, because of these restrictions, and ending up with an increased backlog. We're in a situation this year where we're actually doing better than we were last year in terms of performance to the half-year point at the moment. So we're not as far behind, but we are still behind. And that's a regret in a way. But if we carry on in the same old, there is the potential that that gap would continue. And for that reason, we're not continuing in the same old. We are looking at the way we actually manage the enforcement cases. We have an enforcement officer whose primary role is to go out, do the key inspections, deal with a number of those cases, but they don't deal with all of the cases. What we're now doing is bringing in some more of the planning officers who primarily deal with the new applications, but where there's a breach of a condition on a case they dealt with a couple of months ago, or it's a particularly technical enforcement matter, then we're asking the planning officers to take on board some of that work and try and bite into the enforcement cases. We're also looking back at some of the outstanding cases, and we're not able to do that on a day-to-day case. It's as capacity allows. And in the previous quarter, not the one just seen, the officers dealt with 92 cases they closed. That's the best figure over the last 2.5 years. So only in the last sort of 3 months ago, they had the best performance at closing rates. At the moment, they're dealing with new stuff coming in. And you'd have noticed in that previous report as well, we've had 4 new items come onto the enforcement charts that we're monitoring. Some of those are going to appeals. We've got the Blackbrook appeal to deal with. We've got the other case that's on at the moment. There is a lot more enforcement work going on in the system. We hope to get back into a position of actually closing that gap so that the cases being dealt with matches or even exceeds the amount of cases coming in. And that's part of the focus. We're working through the chairman, the vice chairman, the portfolio holder to review that work. And they're giving us that guidance and assistance to try and move this process forward and target this sort of hiccup that we've got in the process. But it's a situation as officers we recognise cannot continue. And for that reason, we're trying to close this down. And hopefully by end of year, in another 6 months' time, we hope that this trend will, with the new measures being put in place, come back under control and we can get on top of the enforcement matters. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fleet. I invite comment from members. Councillor Moffat, then Councillor Holland.
Yeah, thanks for the report. It sounds like a really sensible idea to have the planning officers who are much more familiar with new cases being able to take some of that pressure off. And I hope that that is a way forward and will continue to give a chance to narrow that gap. So I'm sure that we all appreciate the work that's being done. And also the difficult conditions over the last 18 months that you've had to deal with these enforcement cases in. Can I just ask, though, I seem to remember a while back, a few planning meetings ago, whether because we spoke about an increase in reporting of potential misdemeanors in terms of planning, and whether that kind of coincided with people having more time at home because of COVID and just getting overexcited about what they were and were not allowed to do. I think we did speak about perhaps making it clearer on the council's website about what is permitted development, so to perhaps reduce some of the calls in when neighbours might think something wrong is happening. And I don't know whether any progress was made about that.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. Yes, certainly we did see during the COVID periods, particularly in those lockdown, there did seem to be a surge in some of the householder people either spending longer at home and seeing more about what was happening around them, or people at home possibly thinking I've got an opportunity to adapt my property and doing works. The combination of the two, greater activity and greater observation of activity, created that sort of lead up. And we're just looking at the figures back in that sort of second quarter, July, September of last year, we had 82 new cases come in, which was a jump on the sort of 61 from the month before and the 49 from the quarter before that. So we had seen that sort of spiking. And in the last 2 quarters, we've still got some of that trend. 92 cases came in, and it was really frustrating because it was our best year of getting stuff, a month of getting stuff out at 92 as well. So we only effectively stood still despite the significant work officers were putting in that quarter. But still 72 more cases came in the last quarter. It's a lot of work that's coming into the system at the moment. We don't, having spoken and discussed and looked at the cases and looked around the country as well, I don't think we're quite seeing that same level of at-home activity that we saw before. It's more of a mixed bag of enforcement that's coming through at the moment. But it's something we're trying to monitor. What's the cause? What's the source of some of this work that's coming into the system? But yes, there was a COVID impact, and I think other authorities had found that too. Thank you.
Councillor Holland.
I'd like to apologise to officers for creating more enforcement work, thanks to my comments on a previous item, but I welcome Mr. Fleet's comments on having a plan to get us out of the situation that we're in. I think that's absolutely the commendable attitude to have. And certainly I sympathise with officers who've contended across the country with COVID and with the problems that's placed on our capacity to perform enforcement activity.
Any further comment from members? In that case, are we content to receive the information? That brings us to item 10, which I hope members will agree has been subsumed into item 8, in fact. Unless any member wishes to speak, I propose to progress to item 11 immediately. And on item 11, I think we've got 2 S106s to talk about at Keele and at Tadgedale Quarry. I don't know if our officer can bring us up to speed on those.
Well, the Keele one, we did issue the decision. The 106 was completed eventually. With respect to Tadgedale Quarry, we still anticipate that it will be completed by the newly agreed date of the 19th of November, but I can't say at this time that it has been completed. So we still haven't issued the decision in respect of that planning application, but hopefully before the end of the month we'll have done so.
Thank you very much again. I invite comment from members. And if there is no such comment, again, are we happy that information be received? It's nice to know that one of these has been signed off. That's 50% success rate, isn't it? Let us progress to item 12, where there's, in my opinion, a rather important supplementary running alongside it. As you can see, the original report speaks about 1,000 tonnes of material being necessary to complete the track. On the other hand, the supplementary talks about the Environment Agency saying there is an appropriate amount of material on the land already to complete the track. I don't know, again, if our officer can bring us up to speed on those 2 things, which seem quite different to my eye.
Well, yes, when we prepared the report for the agenda, the track hadn't been put in place. I mean, there's still work to be done to complete the track, but since the preparation of the main agenda report and the supplementary report, the base of the track has been completed in its entirety. So the remainder of the gap that existed has been filled, so to speak. And yeah, so what remains to be done is the application of a top surface to the track, and the indication is that the material is already on site to enable that to take place. So we don't anticipate that there will be any breach of the condition which stipulates that importation of material shall cease by the 1st of November, with certainly no indication that there has been a breach to this point, because that could have happened already. Yes, and at this point in time, we've no reason to believe that the applicant wishes disagrees with the conclusion of the Environment Agency and wishes to import more material onto the site. And certainly the developer, the applicant, knows that if they was to do so, they would need to be a variation of that condition. So there remains the potential that an application will come forward if the developer considers it's necessary, but there's no obvious reason why that would have to happen. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thanks very much, Ms. Moulton. Yes, you've certainly put me straight on that. And it's quite heartening news, I think, at the end of the day. Once again, I invite comment from members. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll put a damper on the good news in a sense, but I'll notice on the drainage system. It's low line there, as we know over the years we've seen different views from different and when we put a track in, you expect drainage to be put in as part of. But I've seen here drainage pipes. Who will be responsible to make sure that they put drainage pipes in? Because if drainage pipes are not up in and not put in properly, that track becomes unusable. So whose responsibility is to make sure that the drains are put in properly? Thank you.
If I just ask our officer to clarify that point.
I'm not as familiar with the details of the planning permission. As far as I'm aware, the planning permission for the track included details of the drainage required to address any surface water runoff issues associated with the introduction of the track. And so we will, as a planning authority, be seeking to ensure that the drainage on the approved plans is implemented in accordance with the planning permission. There may be some external bodies to the council. There may be some controls over drainage through the Environment Agency, for example, but I can't confirm that. But all I can say is we will be seeking to ensure that the development is completed in accordance with the approved plans, and if that does include drainage, which I believe it does, then we will be satisfying ourselves that that is done.
Could you just go in? It does mention it on fifth paragraph down on latest information, and we know in the past where drainage has not been put in properly, it just makes an whole mess of the after planning application. So it's on the fifth paragraph down. It's just appeared there and just brought to mind who was responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And actually, you brought something to my mind, which I should have said earlier. I'm assuming members would like Boggs Cottages and Doddlespill both to recur, not at the next meeting, but the following meeting. So if I ask our officers to note that, and maybe the question of drainage that Councillor Williams has raised could be dealt with at that point in time. Would that be all right, Councillor? That brings us to item 13, but of course we've already dealt with item 13 towards the beginning of our meeting, which brings us to our final item, which as ever is any urgent business as defined by the relevant section of the relevant act. I know of none. I look to our officers to make sure that my ignorance is shared by them.
Yes, there is. There's no items of urgent business.
In that case, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I'll look forward to your company at our next meeting.